welcome to this next in the series of Aging with Attitude. Before introducing my guest, just want to reintroduce a little bit about what Aging with Attitude is about and just a little bit about the times that we're in. So Aging with Attitude is a program, is a purpose, passion, health, directed at the 45 to 64-year-old demographic, and to be constantly working towards, a healthier, more passionate, more purposeful way of living. And there are a variety of different things that we need to consider. Our guest today is going to be teaching us largely about yoga and staying flexible. So with that, our guest name is Ken Bilski. I actually met him at the YMCA. So Ken, what are some of the general things that really are close to your heart when it comes to yoga?
Well, I would say that health is a primary thing, and flexibility, and it's just a wonderful activity to pursue as one ages. I started running in high school, and I ran for 25 or 30 years, and then I jogged for 20, and then I shuffled for about 7 or 8, and now I'm down to walking. So there are many things as you get in that age group and towards the end of that age group that you used to be able to do, and now you kind of have to pull back from. Yoga is not one of those. You can do yoga right up to 100. BKS Iyengar, who was one of the big people in India in the last century, was doing yoga right up to 95, and he was teaching in his early 90s and doing half an hour headstands every day. Not that I intend to do that myself or would recommend that, but yoga is a modest activity. It's something you can continue, and yeah.
So I may not have I said 45 to 64, but it's also about the demographic before and after that supports a way of living, because largely, that 45 to 64-year-old demographic doesn't exist by themselves. They have younger family members, older family members, and it's just being supportive with each other. And sometimes that is about modeling what it is that we're doing, whether it be healthy eating or exercises or whatever. Personally, I've taken a few yoga classes, and I really feel it when flexibility is increased. So Ken will show us a little bit. He's here in one of his sitting modes, and so he's got a few basic modes and poses that he'll share with us. So Ken, could you maybe share some of those most basic or most important yoga poses?
Sure. And I will say back on flexibility that I started yoga at 52, and I could barely touch my toes. And now it's almost 20 years later, 71, and I'm much more flexible now than I was to begin with, and my balance is much better too. So yoga is a progression, and you start slow and you build up. And for any given yoga pose, you start with the basic idea of it, and then you refine over years. You get an increase in refinement. So one of the best poses to start out with is just from table position and doing a little vinyasa, which is a flow, and it's between cow, which is letting the navel drop towards the floor, and the gaze is somewhat forward, and cat, where you take the back up towards the ceiling, and then you just alternate gently and slowly back and forth. So the first rule of yoga is do no harm. You never force, you never strain. You always keep things within your range, and you just take it to approximately your edge where you feel some stretching coming in, and you work with that edge. So for this alternation between cow and cat, you just stay within your range, and you get nice flexion and extension of the spine. The spine is one of the most important parts of the body. Well, every part is important, but it's one of the central parts that yoga works predominantly on. So this allows for extension of the back and then flexion of the back, and then gently persuading all the paraspinal muscles to relax and lengthen. So that's one. And then you can take that to a greater extent and move into Pashimotanasana, downward facing dog, probably the one you see most often in cartoons about yoga in the Sunday paper. And it's a basic inversion where the head is a little bit lower than the heart. So it helps with blood flow and getting the body used to unusual poses. I mean, one thing about yoga is you're persuading the body to integrate, to accept different positions. The older you get, the more you're just sitting or lying down. And yoga is a gentle way of countering that and introducing the body and getting the body used to different positions. So you'll have those positions available to you and that flexibility available to you when you try to do other stuff day to day, like reaching for that last box of granola up on that top shelf in the supermarket, any number of reasons. So anyway, this is downward facing dog, and you just start with a general attempt at the position. And then you can refine over minutes or years, stretching the tailbone away from the hands, relaxing the shoulders a little bit down towards the floor, relaxing the neck, giving the head a little bit of a shake and allowing the forehead to drop towards the floor. Pressing a little more strongly the palms of the hands forward and down, and then perhaps seeing if you can release the hamstrings a bit and allow the heels to drop a little bit closer. And another nice thing of yoga is just the terminology. This is Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. So there's just the linguistics of yoga is very nice. So those are a couple poses and how one transitions to another, and some of the various benefits of that.
And that's all very interesting. And I like the fact that you talked about, what are some of the places of flexibility that those that are in that demographic and either going out of it or into it, 45 to 64, somewhere's around there, what kind of muscles and stuff are we going to be needing? I mean, I know that balance is a big one. I know that flexibility is a big one. I know that, general stretching exercises out there are big. I know that squatting exercises, those exercises to get us up and down, I know they're big. Could you elaborate on all of that?
Yes. Well, that's one nice thing is that there are a great number of yoga poses. So they work on every part of the body. All the muscles get used at some point or other. All of the joints get used at some point or other. So it's beneficial in all those ways for the entire body. And yoga is, in some ways, it's complex. I mean, it's been developing for 1,500 years in India, and then it just was brought to the West maybe only about 100 years ago. But it's basically quite simple. Almost all yoga poses are variations of forward folds or back bends, side bend, inversions where the head is a little bit lower than the heart, twists, and balance poses. Everything is some variation of that, plus occasionally poses that work on a very specific part of the body, like cobbler pose, named because shoemakers would sit around with knees taken out and the legs in a diamond position. And this is a great hip opener. So there are also some yoga positions that emphasize certain parts of the body. And there are things for shoulders. And Many of the yoga poses, however, you can simplify poses because many are duplicates of others, but just from different positions. For instance, you have Uttanasana, which means extreme forward stretch, and that's a forward fold like this. And then you can do the same pose from a sitting position, and that's a different pose called Pashimotanasana, which is honoring the West as you fold towards it, and that's this guy. So this is the same as Uttanasana, except from a seated position. And then you can do reclining. And this is a forward fold, just from a supine position. This is called Halasana, or the plow pose. So even though there's this complexity of yoga positions, they're all, they can all be, you can wrap your mind around them in a subset of positions.
That's most interesting. I can't help but notice that you have a very nice home studio there. And I've got 3 different questions around home studios. Can or should people practice in a studio, just say go once a week or twice a week, or can they do some things regularly at home? Like, what's best? And what about the ambiance around you? I noticed that you've got a very nice ambiance, like a nice rug and another nice rug on the wall, and you've got a piano in the background there. Could you maybe elaborate a little more on that stuff?
Yeah, well, yoga is very good publicly and it's very good privately. I mean, it's one of those bimodal things where it's wonderful to I mean, it's an avenue. It's an avenue to communicate with the community. I mean, if you go out and you do yoga publicly, either in a park or at a studio, of course, that's all in flux now because of COVID. But you know, at various times, studios will be open. Hopefully they'll be open now forever, but depending on variants, who knows? But it's a nice way to go out and meet people and do a communal activity, one that you know is beneficial for everybody, for your own health. It's also nice because you can do yoga in your home, and I would say that if you had a choice of doing it 1 90-minute session at a studio per week or doing it every day, well, think of it like a piano. When you practice piano, you should do some every day as opposed to doing just one big chunk of time 1 day a week. And yoga, I would say, is the same thing. You should try to do a number of minutes, 10 or 15 minutes a day, as opposed to one big chunk. The daily routine, the daily rhythm of stretching all throughout the body is best if you can do it day by day. And again, if you have if you're doing it in your home, having a nice setup, a yoga mat to help absorb the little bit of shock, so it provides a little bit of resilience in your base where you're practicing yoga. It certainly helps for because yoga is both a mental activity and a physical activity. The physical activity is both the breath work and rhythm and the stretching and the strengthening, all of that, all rolled in one. But that has aspects, of course, the mental aspects. As you calm and strengthen and stabilize the body, that spills over into calming and strengthening and stabilizing your attitude and how you approach life.
Ken, are you familiar with any, medical situations, like say people with arthritis, or what the medical community might think about yoga? Do they recommend it to people? What can you tell us about that?
Yes, it's quite well recommended by the medical community. It's also recommended by the athletic community. For decades, NFL, National Football League teams have been doing yoga, and MLB, Major League Baseball teams have been doing yoga. It's part of the mix. Yoga is quite varied within itself, but it's actually I regard it as part of cross training. I mean, I do some other stuff. You know, yoga is not the be all and end all. It's nice to do it balanced with other things. Like, well, if you're in your 70s, walking is probably the best other thing to do with it. But you can, you know, bicycling, whatever. But the medical community came on to yoga a while back, and it's definitely recommended. However, in tune with do no harm, you're always, if you haven't done any yoga before and you're in the age group we're discussing or beyond, it always is a good idea to discuss with your doctor, because your doctor knows your own limitations and your own history. Get that straightened out with before you go into it. And then particularly if you have something like arthritis, or you have weak wrists, or you've maybe had some injury, you do have to be a little cognizant of that and know how to protect that. When I instruct yoga, and some of the poses will be heavy on wrists, like Adho Mukha Svanasana, or Dandasana, seated staff pose. And I'll always say, when we start a pose like this, where you're putting weight into the wrists, either do that on the palm of the hands, or fingertips, or make fists. Sometimes I will go through periods where my wrists are a little bit weak for some reason, and I'll do all my push-ups, or I'll do all my plank positions within yoga with in this position with my hands as fists, and then the angle is a 180-degree angle, which is a lot easier for your wrists to take than this position. This position is very good, but both positions are weight bearing on the wrists, and as we know, weight bearing allows the bones to heal themselves. And the calcium to get redeposited so that your wrists are stronger. And so that's another benefit of yoga, is weight bearing in many different positions. So all the bones get their share of some weight bearing and their share of some upkeep and maintenance and healing.
It's interesting that you pointed out that, you know, sometimes our palms and our wrists are a little weaker than other times. I guess that goes for other parts of our bodies too, our flexibility, maybe our balance. Can you think of any things that might affect people's maybe strength in their wrists on certain days, or flexibility on certain days, or balance on certain days? Like, can you make any suggestions?
Well, too much work, or too much vacation, or too much intensity of doing something, or too much time off, all of those, just, you know, it's part of the flow of life. And you just have to approach every day as new. Every moment is new. Every moment is open for exploration, but every moment requires that you do a little bit of self-evaluation and see what level of myself am I bringing to my yoga today, and what legacy from what I did yesterday do I have to be aware of. So you always want to have, you know, a sense of yourself as a body, and know how much you need to bring in, and you always start slowly. You never
It sounds like there's a real sense of mindfulness that you need to approach yoga with, or at least practice mindfulness. Is that right?
Yes. So yoga is a good tool for sharpening that sense of awareness, sharpening that mindfulness, and bringing the sense of now into your existence. Yes.
You know, I've heard lots, and yoga's been compared, or you think you have to get some kind of a spiritual attitude, or start meditating or, practice some Eastern religion. Is that true? Like, what can you say about those kinds of things?
Well, there's good and bad in that. There's yin and yang in that. There's east and west in that. Yoga originally, over 1,500 years of development, is multivariant. Yoga, what we know of as yoga, we call pretty much hatha yoga, which is the positions, the postures, the asanas. And most people in the West just look at that as one specific thing, and they go to a yoga class and then they leave the yoga class and that's it. Historically, that was just one of 8 limbs of yoga. Yoga also includes ethical observances, cleansing practices, methods of concentration, methods of meditation. So it's a much more holistic thing than just concentration on the body itself. So to the extent that you allow yoga to go into that and to assist in your life path of developing ethical behavior and ability to meditate, and that ability to meditate is an ability to appreciate everything in the universe at once, as you yourself as part of that. So yes, that blending of yoga into everything else is excellent if you can allow that or work with that. At a minimum, just practicing the poses, the physical, if you do it mindfully, is sufficient. And maybe all that you need or want. So yoga, there's a vast spectrum there, but you don't need to do anything other than the integration of breath, mind, and body through postures.
Okay, so if one of my viewers or even myself is part of that, is just doing just the yoga and didn't really do anything else, like what would you suggest that be? We may have already covered a little bit of that, but maybe you could do a few just general poses, just some basic yoga things and attitudes that we should keep in mind.
Yes. Because actually, when you go to a yoga class, some of that is already incorporated. Like virtually everybody, myself included, starts with some breath work and a little bit of meditation, just a couple minutes to let yourself settle down after you've been rushing to get to the studio to make sure you get there on time. So you prepare the ground by some breath work and some meditation, where you emphasize the rhythm of the breath, and you allow that to bring about some relaxation. And then you start slowly. I almost do a class that, if you were to graph it, looks like so, where you start with the breath work and the meditation, and then you go to some supine lying down poses, and then some seated poses, maybe some table poses. And in the middle of the class, you get to the standing poses. And those are also the most intense. And then after that, maybe down another set of sitting poses, and then lying down, and eventually Shavasana. So you end in a very relaxed state. You start in a very relaxed state, you end in a very relaxed state. The hardest part of Shavasana is not falling asleep. Every once in a while in my classes, somebody will be snoring by the end of Shavasana. Every once in a while in my classes, as I'm leading Shavasana, I will, after like 2 or 3 minutes, start to realize, oh, I'm starting to have some dream sequences. I better end the class now. Yeah, and that's something you can bring into your personal practice in your home, is this kind of grafting, where you start with meditative, relaxing, and then you increase to intensity, where the intensity in the middle of the practice is the highest. Maybe you're doing vinyasas like sun salutations, and then you end also in relaxation. And then that is an hour or half an hour or whatever experience that you can ground your day on and, center your day on and center your own being's response to the entire day through that.
So, Ken, we're just in the last couple of minutes of our show. And so, time to have talk to the viewers a little bit about where they can go and to participate. Like, I know that I went to the YMCA. I know there's studios around town here, but there must be something that they could Google that maybe they could do their yoga at home. And do you have any instructions that people may find some yoga that they can participate in at home, real quick?
Google beginners yoga. You don't want to do any of the fancy stuff. You don't want to do any pretzel stuff. You want to do simple stuff. And actually, when you take yoga at studios, also check and make sure it's beginners yoga. If you haven't done, yoga before, not much. There's something called Yoga Glow, which comes out of Santa Monica, and they've got 50 different teachers, each having 50 classes, and that's a wonderful thing. That's like $24 a month, but I subscribe to that because it's quite varied. And then you can go around the world, Greece, Spain, India, and do yoga retreats. Scotland, I've done yoga retreats in the Highlands of Scotland. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Well, Ken, I just want to say thank you for helping us to be on our way with our yoga experience at whatever level we're at, or none, right in our own living rooms during this time of COVID. And just a reminder to, really, for the viewers out there, to really be thinking about what's that passion and that purpose, those things that are going to keep you flexible and engaged. And just try some new things and give yourself a new experience. There's lots locally, but there's also stuff online. Just get an idea of what it is you want to do. And remember, beginner's yoga, if you haven't, if you're new to this. Again, I want to thank you, Ken, for joining us, and for Shaw for doing this. So just a couple of last words there. Go ahead.
From me?
Yeah, if you have a couple of last words, yes.
Do yoga when you can. Don't do too much. Everything in moderation. It's just part of the mix. So keep that mix alive and varied and be engaged.
Well, thank you so much. And my name is Rita Weeb, and thanks for joining us.